Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Voltron Legendary Defender video. This one's mainly going to be like some of my final thoughts going into Season 8, the last season, and also talking about what coverage you're going to see about the season on my channel. So obviously Season 8 comes out next week on the 14th, which I believe is Friday, and it is the last season of Voltron. So the coverage I'm going to be doing, it's going to be similar to the way I've done previous seasons with just a slight difference. So the usual way I do it is that I basically, as I'm going through my first watch of the series, of the season, I'll break after maybe three or so episodes, maybe 4, do a video, then watch the next group of episodes, do a video, then watch the next group of episodes, do a video. And you'll get like 3 or 4 videos that way. The difference here is that when I get to the last episode, I'm actually going to do like a separate video for that on its own and actually basically have the camera on as I'm watching it. So it'll be similar here. It'll be basically just me and my face, except I'll have my laptop down here and I'll be watching it, listening to it, and I'll tell you guys like obviously when I'm starting it so that you can kind of follow along if you want to do that, watch along with the last episode with me. Just a way to get get my kind of live reaction to the last episode. So you'll see that as well, and that'll be the main kind of difference. So that'll probably be 4 videos covering the season. We will also get around to doing a Voltron Online podcast, myself and Greg. We will do that. I'm not sure about the scheduling yet. Like, if possible, we might be able to do it like that weekend. If not, it may get a bit tricky. It may be waiting like a week or 2 afterwards, just because the week after Voltron airs is when the next Avatar comic comes out, and that's obviously a priority for us as mainly an Avatar podcast that also covers Voltron. So we'll see how that plays out, but you will at some point get a Voltron Online podcast about the last season, and that'll be a really in-depth analysis and so on. And then hopefully before the end of the year, I'll have some sort of a kind of series in review, kind of initial reaction to the ending of the series overall type thing. Was the show good overall? That sort of thing. Just an initial general thoughts type thing. So you'll see a lot of content like that on my channel next week, and obviously as the year comes to an end. So that's what you can expect from the channel. So definitely, obviously, check out my channel next week for a lot of that stuff. As for, I suppose, some other stuff, obviously this trailer for Season 8, the proper trailer where we got to see a little bit of new footage came out. I didn't do a trailer analysis on it because I didn't think it was that great of a trailer. Like has been the case for more or less the last couple of seasons of Voltron, the trailer is never a great representation about what the season actually is, because they never give any depth on any of the plots. Like this trailer, for example, is basically just, this is the end. Here's a brief flash of each of the characters and addressing their journey. Here's where they came from. This is where they are now. You know, it's a universe-ending threat is the last thing. Here's a brief shot of like Hagar, some explosions, some action, and just that it's going to be emotional. It's going to be intense. It's the last season. It's what you expect. But there's nothing I think to really talk about, and that's why I'll always say with this trailer, I don't think it affected my speculation really at all. In that the video I did just after Season 7, speculating on Season 8, is still, I think, just as valid now. So I'll link that in the description below, and you can check that out. It's like 40 minutes long, and it's really in depth about like everything about the Voltron plot, character shipping, all that sort of stuff. So really for the rest of the video here, I'm not going to spend too much time because, as I said, I think that video covers a lot of my thoughts. So just some stuff, I suppose, maybe stemming off from the comments to that video, because that video is actually one of my more popular ones. That video got, like, I think at this point has like close to 7,000 views on it, like 150 or so comments. And what was very interesting is that most of the comments were only, out of this whole discussion video, 40 minutes, only really discussing clans. And that was so, it was expected in a way, but also weird that, like, wow, it really is an odd situation with Voltron where so many of the, like, really passionate fans that would search out a speculation video, that's the only, like, main discussion point about it. Now, obviously, as is ever the case with YouTube, it's always the case where, like, for the most part, discussion only tends to come in if someone disagrees with you, rather than, like, nodding along, like, yeah, that seems solid enough, don't really have much to say to it, but what, you don't think Clance is going to happen? And that causes a comment. I think that's probably the effect going on here, because I went quite in depth with the other speculation, and I think a lot of it is kind of very grounded in what the show is about. So I don't think there was too much to disagree with what I said in the rest of the speculation. But obviously the shipping being such a kind of big topic in the Voltron fandom, and has been from the start, I get why it kind of maybe prompted that. So I'll just go a little bit more in depth on, I suppose, why I don't think Clance is going to actually happen in the show in the end. And as I basically explained in that video, obviously not really knowing the full extent of the, I suppose, intensity to which people expect a Clance to happen. And part of it is just that I think the two members of that ship, Lance and Keith, I think they're going to pair them up with different characters. I think it's going to be Lance and Allura, and I think it's going to be Keith and Oxia. And the reason for that is, a lot of it is last season, but I think there's been set up before that. I think they have clearly showed us that is the path that they're taking. And that, combined with the fact that I really, in the grand scheme of things, don't think that Lance and Keith have had any romantic development. I'll get around to discussing their development as characters in just a second. But just, at this point, I think there is so much to do to make Clance happen. I don't think they're going to have enough time to make the plot happen for the final season, end the show well, do all the character arcs, wrap-ups for the villains and that sort of thing, power-ups and action scenes, and also basically break up two relationships that look like they're going to happen in Lance and Allura and Keith and Oxia, and also then romantically set up and make happen Keith and Lance. I think that's a little bit too much to do, and if they do manage to do it there, it'll be probably very rushed and feel a little odd that they're going that direction. So, to me, that's the way they're going with it. And I think I doubled down on it in that speculation video, because it wasn't just the fact that, like, Allura and Lance are kind of like blushing around each other. We know Lance clearly likes her, and it's very much developing that Allura is beginning to really see Lance in that way as well. But the fact that Veronica then had a couple of scenes where she noted, like, Lance's attraction towards Allura, but then also that, like, oh, I think she likes you as well. And it was, yeah, the teasing kind of part of the two of them, but just the fact that she noticed that chemistry, they're doubling down on, like, alerting you to the fact that that relationship is a thing. Similarly, Keith and Oxia, they did the same thing with Ezward and Zethrid, where the two of them teased Keith and Oxia about having a relationship. And even though Keith and Oxia haven't had a lot of screen time together, they're Oxia, just as a character, has a sort of link to Keith, just based on the fact that that's how she was basically introduced as a character, Keith saving her, and they've sort of just returned the favour to each other both times. And as two very warrior-focused characters, I think that's the sort of, like, physical type development that they're going for with the two of them. Hopefully they have a good few scenes together next season, in Season 8, to allow us to, I suppose, get behind that ship a little bit more. But I think they've done enough with the setup where, like, that feels a little bit more likely because it has more romantic setup than a Keith and Lance. And it's not to say that, like, Keith and Lance just don't have development. They do. It's probably one of the more well-developed dynamic between two characters. But I don't think it's a romantic dynamic, and I think that's the important thing to get across here. In that, to me, their dynamic is basically going from being rivals, the two of them being annoyed constantly at each other, to at this point actually being close friends, and more specifically being, in Keith's case, the leader of Voltron, and Lance is the right-hand man, because that's the development that they've done for Lance that was really good in the last couple of seasons. He has gone through a lot of development to make him the worthy right-hand man, giving him the position of the Red Line, Alfor's position, kind of unlocking the broadsword. Some of the scenes with Allura have definitely led down that road, where, like, she's sort of beginning to see that leadership quality within Lance, more so than the sort of goofy Loverboy Lance stuff from the earlier seasons, and I think that's where that development is coming from. But with Keith and Lance, it's just that I think they've gained a respect for each other. Whereas in the earlier seasons, you would never have ever thought that Lance would be able to accept Keith as being his like commanding officer. Now he accepts that, but it's out of respect. And Keith also respects Lance enough to basically immediately hand over command of a mission when he has to go off on his own. And I think that development of just that respect between the two characters is, I think, what their dynamic is. I don't really see it as being romantic. A lot of people bring up like little kind of teases of like, oh, but they said like bonding moments and stuff like that. But I think like characters are allowed to have bonding moments even if it's not romantic, because they had to go from being rivals and being at each other's throats more or less to becoming respectful of each other. So of course they're going to have bonding moments where they're just like hanging out together and there's nothing to argue about, and they realize they're more similar, or they kind of both kind of see as a different side of each other in that way. Now maybe you can go down as far as to be like, oh, but like if they do begin to see each other romantically, then those scenes will kind of then become more setup moments, and that's fine. And ultimately, like if they do clans, if clans does happen, I'm not going to be annoyed or anything like that. I just think the setup in the show has very much led to me to believe that it's not particularly likely to happen, and that other relationships are more likely to happen. And I think that's probably the difference, I think, between both of the sides here, of like people who are pro clans and then people who, like, I wouldn't say anti clans, but just they don't really think or see it in the show as being necessarily something that will become canon. Is that I think the people who don't see it yet are still willing to sort of be able to get behind it if the show actually shows it happening. Whereas I'm a little worried that if clans doesn't happen, it's going to be this really, really big issue within the Voltron fandom, that it will take up so much time and effort of the discussion around the last season. And I think that would be such a shame for the show to end, and the only thing that's discussed is this big controversy about if clans happened or not. When there's such a great plot going on, world building, villains, plots to be resolved, the final season stuff is going to be intense. We might see some character deaths. We're going to see, obviously, one aspect of it is, of course, that we'll see the end game of some of the ships, I assume. We might get a flash forward epilogue and see some other stuff. That's what I think I want to see more of the discussion about. I don't want this to sort of be like maybe Legend of Korra, where the Korra Sami happening at the end took up so much of the discussion that like the actual finale of the show, the ending of the show, never really got its kind of never really got its time in the spotlight, because it was all taken up with just Korra Sami happened, when it was such a small aspect of the show. So I think that's most of what I want to say there, and just again make it clear that I'm not like anti-clans, or I don't have any issue with people shipping it. It's just from the way I view the show, which is what's presented on screen is the canon content, and I go based off that. That's how I do my shipping. If they begin to show romantic moments between characters, then I'll maybe jump on board a ship and kind of pick and choose. But if characters aren't really demonstrating any sort of dynamic between each other that's like leaning towards romance, to me I really have nothing to go off, and because of that I don't really see Keith and Lance being kind of romantic in any way. I like their development as friends, and maybe if they do some good scenes together they can make it so that that's actually a pretty good relationship, but I don't see it happening right now. And that's just the, I think, entirely reasonable point I was more or less trying to make in the other video, and I just want to clarify here. And just really hope that if clans doesn't happen, that it's not this huge show-destroying issue for people. Because I sort of am beginning to get the sense that there are a lot of people out there who are going to basically just kind of completely disown this show if that ship doesn't happen. And I think that's that's going to be a very unfortunate thing, because just like viewing a show solely out of a ship, like, it's not something I understand, but I suppose, there are going to be people, of course, who view the show for a variety of different reasons, and if the shipping is one of them, that's fine. It's okay to be frustrated if it doesn't happen, but there's also just the logic of the situation of, like, if you've been watching 8 seasons of this show expecting a ship to happen, when in the grand scheme of things, like, it hasn't really had any romantic development the entire time, part of that is on you, and I don't think there's a ton to complain to the creators about this. And obviously there's been a bit of an issue with the Voltron fandom, and I think perhaps too much, like, aggression towards the creators with regards to stuff that's happened. And I don't think the show is perfect. I think there's been flaws in, like, all of the seasons. The quality has gone up and down. Like, I think especially the first 4 seasons, the quality is, like, really up and down. They've really solidified it in 5, 6, and 7, but it's still not perfect. There are times when, like, they do plots and they've set it up for multiple seasons, and then they just resolve it, like, super quickly, and there's not a lot of depth. If I had an overall criticism based on the first 7 seasons, that's probably it, and that just some plots just feel like that needed way more depth than you gave it. But there's that. And then I suppose, how do I want the show to end? How do I want the show to do its epilogue? Because with any show, when it comes to an end, I'm always very intrigued to see how they do their ending. In that, I in most things, I like a good, like, extended epilogue. I'd probably prefer, like, a couple of episodes if they had the opportunity of just, the action is over, here's maybe the initial aftermath in terms of just the cool down, maybe characters getting together, and I want to see, like, some time skips. I want to see, like, where that goes. Like, if you're not going to give me further seasons of these characters and these relationships, show me, like, the results of those relationships. Show me the families forming and stuff like that. That's kind of what I want to see, because I often get a little bit frustrated when, like, there's romantic setup for characters, and then it happens right at the end, and it's kind of like, okay, but, like, a lot of the times the way these ships kind of end up going is that the characters are kind of awkward, and it's being very teased, and, like, that they sort of like each other, but it also means that very few of their scenes together are them directly, like, interacting in a romantic way. So you never actually get to see the ship actually happen. It's just confirmed right at the end. Maybe there's a kiss scene, and that's it. Like, you never see them, like, together as a couple. It happens right at the end, and it's like, oh, you know what happens to the rest. When it's so much more interesting when two characters, like, I think, get together in, like, the middle of a series, or you actually get to see what happens. And that's why I'd be perfectly fine if by the end of the show they skip ahead a little bit of time and show if the characters have kids or not. Like, that's what I'd like to see if like, we're not going to get any more content in this Voltron. I suspect there'll probably be comics that will continue this, but, like, if there'll be, like, the tie-in comics that we had now where the quality is fine but not great, or maybe they'll really move on and those comics will actually become much more important. But that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the progress of those ships, because I definitely over time have become a bit like, oh, those characters that you set up for, like, multiple seasons have just got together, and now we're never going to see what the result of them getting together is. And that's why I like the Avatar comics so much, because we just see Aang and Katara together as a couple and stuff like that. So I want to actually see some of that stuff, and then especially because of I suppose some of the themes of Voltron. Like, I want to see if they bring peace to the universe, like, how long do these paladins stay as the paladins of Voltron? Now that Voltron's kind of back in play, what happens with regards to, like, our characters aging and not being able, in a way, to be the next paladins? Like, are we going to see who's being set up to be the next generation of pilots of the lines? Will Voltron actually, like, survive the series? That is actually, like, a question you could have. Like, they might have Voltron be destroyed in the final battle, and it's just that it's this odd situation where what happens is that the main weapon of the good guys and the bad guys is destroyed at the same time. They've saved the universe, but they've lost Voltron. I don't necessarily think they'll do that. I think they'll, if they maybe do something along those lines, find some way to have Voltron be like healed or rebuilt, and that they probably will continue the generation on. And in a way, that's kind of something I feel that they might want to do. That our generation, our characters will go down as one of the like legendary teams of Voltron, but that they will show who's next to show that it continues on, that Voltron's back and will stay for good. And just, I think that they probably owe it to us after all of these seasons to give us a sense of, okay, they've brought peace to the world, the Galra Empire is done. Just what's the state of the galaxy at this point? Because I think one of the things they probably need to go into a little bit more is, what is the Galra people without being that empire? Now that, like, when you get to the end of the show, I assume you'll have got rid of all the people who are incorporating magic and quintessence into the Galra Empire. When you take that away, are you left with basically the blades represent what the Galra Empire is meant to be, or is it something different altogether? Also, you know, like, will they elect a new emperor, and who will that be? There's a lot of like questions along those lines, because obviously Lotor might come back. They might see it fit to redeem him. There's so many paths that they can go down. It's pretty incredible, and in that sense, I'm excited for the season just because they can go in so many different ways. I just hope that in this final season they don't make it like so battle focused that it's just more and more action. Because I think in the last season, one of my criticisms was just that we get a lot of Voltron fights that are somewhat similar, and they're not really doing anything overly unique with the fights. So I'd almost like them to keep like the fighting to a minimum, so that the big fight at the end, they can just go all out and do everything that they need to do in it. And they make it more character plot focused in this last season, so that, you know, it ends on a high note with what it needs to end on. So that's a large part of kind of what I'm interested in going in. And like I said with this topic here of just the kind of epilogue and how they'll do it, I hope they give us a more extended epilogue, that we've known these characters long enough where I want to see a longer stretch of them kind of in a happy situation. I don't want it to be this rush thing where like we beat the villain, there's maybe 2 minutes to go, and it's just rush, here's who's together, happy, and kind of like they did with the end of last season. I hope they give enough time in the last episode to where the show can end on a, I suppose, truly satisfying note. So that's where I'm going to end it here. This video wasn't meant to be like a second speculation video. I just wanted to give some final thoughts before obviously the next season comes out. The last season comes out next week. So yeah, they're my kind of how I'm feeling going in. A lot of it was just I wanted to react to the whole Clamps thing, and how I do expect that that is going to be a very interesting thing to keep track of over the course of the launch, basically, as everyone is watching the episodes for the first time. And if it does or does not happen, I think either way it's going to be a really big talking point in the fandom. I just hope it doesn't take over the entire discussion, and we can actually, when season 8 comes to an end, just acknowledge that what a journey we've been on watching Voltron on Netflix. So there are my thoughts. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are going in. And yeah, I'll just end by saying, as I said earlier on in the video, I will have tons of coverage of Voltron Season 8 on the channel and also on the podcast, which I'll probably put up as a video here as well. Expect probably 3-4 videos on probably the day of launch, the 14th. You know, me talking about the first 3 episodes, the second 3 episodes, last 3 episodes, something like that. And then I will do a live reaction to the last episode. So there are my thoughts. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on heading into the last season of Voltron. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.